Upadesa Sahasri 1855 says, no api ato sabda bhavena, jñaptih iti api yujite, no hi atma vikriya matro, nitya atmeti sastat. The word knowledge, in the sense of action of knowing, cannot similarly be applied to the self. For self is not subject to change, as it is eternal, according to the Vedas. In this verse, fourth derivation, that is knowing process or knowing kriya, is negated, as it will mean that self will become an action and will have modification. Knowledge generally refers to the knowing action only. Knowledge is mortal action, whereas the self is immortal. Hence, vitpatti or knowing in the form of action does not fit in with the self, and therefore self cannot be called jñaptih or action of knowing. Verse 1856 says, no बुद्धि वाच्यत्वं कारणं न हि कर्तृत्वं नापि ज्ञानं इत्येवं कर्म शब्दैः निरूप्यते. The word knowledge in the sense of the instrument of action of knowing is applied to the intellect and not to the self, as an instrument cannot exist without an agent. Self cannot be derived through the karma vitpatti of jnanam also. Jnayate iti jnanam or karma vitpatti, that is instrument of action, will not fit to the self. If self is taken as object of knowledge, another self will be required to know that self, and an endless process will come into effect. Therefore, karma vitpatti is also ruled out. In this way, all four derivatives have been negated and established that knowledge can never reveal the self directly. The self is never known, Atma is aprameya.
The first derivative, jñaptih iti jnanam, subject of knowledge, negated by saying that the self cannot be revealed by words. In verse 52, the second derivative, jñayate iti jnana, that which is known, object derivation, negated in verse 53, as the intellect and reflection of the self are not discriminated from the self. The word knows is applied falsely to it. Third derivative, janati anen iti jnanam, that through which a person knows, the instrument of knowledge, negated by the logic that it is applied to the intellect and not to the self, as an instrument cannot exist without an agent. In verse 56, fourth derivative, jñaptih jnanam, the knowing process, negated by saying that the self is not subject to change as it is eternal. In verse 55, verse 57-58 says, no yesam ek evatma nirdukho o vikriyasra tesam syat chand vachaptum geyattum cho atmana sada. The self cannot be known as an object and cannot be the direct meaning of a word according to those who hold that it is eternally changeless, free from pain and one only. Yada ahankartur atmatvam tada sabdarth mukhita nas nayati matvatu suto tasya atma tesate. If ego were the self, a word might be applied to it in its primary sense, but it is not the self according to the Shruti, as it is possessed of hunger etc. As said in verse 29-30, words which denote the ego and other things which reflect the innermost self express the latter only indirectly and by no means describe it directly, for nothing without attributes can be described by words.